How do you stop a genocide? World powers watching one unfold in Gaza right now know the answer. History should tell them that Palestinian life in Gaza will be obliterated without a forceful intervention that makes it impossible for Israel to continue its genocide. But will any power step up to that challenge? I'm Tony Karon, editorial lead of AJ+, and I like to study lessons from history. You already know enough, so do I. It's not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and draw conclusions. That's a quote from Sven Lindqvist, the great Swedish historian of racism and genocides. And it challenges us to read the writing on the wall, which is something the governments of the world are studiously avoiding. We all know that the Nazi Holocaust was ended only by the military defeat of Hitler's Germany. But what are the genocides that have occurred since? Some examples from the past half century show a pattern. The Cambodia genocide, in which the Khmer Rouge killed up to 2 million Cambodians between 1975 and 1979, was ended only by Vietnam invading and militarily toppling the Khmer Rouge. The 1994 Rwanda genocide, in which Hutu nationalist government forces murdered about 800,000 Tutsi and opposition Hutu in just 100 days, was ended by the RPF militia fighting their way to the capital and ousting the regime. The 1995 Bosnia genocide, in which Serb forces killed tens of thousands of Bosniak Muslims, was halted by NATO air forces bombing Serb positions. See the pattern? No genocide in modern history was ever ended without military pressure on the perpetrators. Genocides are either halted by military force or the threat of military force, or they are left to run their course, as we see today, for example, in Myanmar, where the Rohingya have been under genocidal attack by the military regime for the past 7 years, in Darfur, where hundreds of thousands have been killed over the past 22 years by government-backed militia, and of course in Gaza, where Israel has killed more than 63,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians, almost half children, wounded more than 160,000, imposed a siege that brings death by starvation, and it adds to that tally every day. So, how has Israel been able to sustain this plainly criminal campaign? The answer is impunity. Israel has faced no consequences strong enough to restrain its criminality, and no significant pressure from those with the power to pressure it to halt its campaign. The legal framework for intervention is there. The UN Security Council almost 20 years ago embraced a principle called responsibility to protect civilians by taking action where those civilians are threatened by genocide, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing. Exactly the crimes that are being perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel in Gaza right now. But there's no sign of any world powers accepting that responsibility to protect Palestinian civilians. Perhaps they're waiting for action by the United States, erstwhile self-appointed global sheriff that certainly has the military and political capacity to stop the Gaza genocide. But the US has shown no intention to use that capacity to stop Israel. Under President Biden, it enabled the genocide with arms and diplomatic cover. Under President Trump, it's gone even further, openly aligning with Israel's stated goals of entirely eliminating Hamas and ethnically cleansing Gaza. President Trump has called it clearing out the territory and has vowed to take direct US control to build a Gaza Riviera free of Palestinians. These goals are reflected in the behavior of both Israel and the US over ceasefire terms they keep changing, which have until now served principally to buy time for Israeli forces to achieve objectives that seem to be endorsed by the US. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu says Trump told him, forget the partial deals, go in with full force, finish it. The US hasn't thus far contradicted that statement, and President Trump has repeatedly stressed that it's up to Israel to decide Gaza's fate now and in the long term. So if the US is effectively underwriting the genocide and co-owning the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, it clearly has no intention of acting to save Palestinian Gaza. The sheriff, you might say, has gone fully rogue. History of the past 2 years and of the past 80 years tells us there's no end to the genocide in Gaza without action that imposes intolerable consequences on Israel continuing. That won't come from the United States as long as the United States embraces the goals of turning Gaza into an ethnically cleansed Riviera. Those who risk life and limb sailing to Gaza on the Sumud flotilla have had the courage to draw conclusions and to act on them. But while their citizens act, are the world's governments going to simply continue to let the genocide play out unchallenged?